Hey. This creep mod had an update.
I was playing multiplayer, and I'm still playing
Arctic Adventure, Epishits, multiplayer.
No, now please be silent. Okay?
Quack.
Okay, enough of molesting innocent bystanders. Let's get to the real ham already. Great. Finally some lighting was added in the respective places. Oh, Dead Stare Man is still here. Better get going. It seems the guy wasn't lying when he said this was an overall texture work. Props on him for trying to flip around this disaster of an experience. Hello there, Captain Depression. I see your outpost had quite an improvement. A bit. Unfortunate that little Hammer World editor picture of the map was replaced, but I guess he's now at least trying. I know I might be asking for too much, but I hope this guy has more involvement than a couple of lines, because as far as I care I would simply leave regular rebels to do his job.
Look, Mr. Freeman, together we must do everything we can to put an end in this war.
As stated in my original playthrough. Good stuff this speaking of this mod. Quick question for my boy Cyric. How did the rebels manage to find this Glock pistol when no enemy or ally in this game uses it either? And yes, that goes for Valve 2 with the 357 Magnum, aka the Colt Python for the OG Half-Life 1 peeps. Oh, so you now use the APC like everyone else? Finally something sensical on this pile of nonsense. Such a beautiful transition. I'm crying, or at least my eyes are due to that white flash, but I guess that's something. So that's how you exit a vehicle? Another important life lesson given by this mod. Only state-of-the-art hacks.
Mr. Freeman, try to take on them from behind. Thus we'll attack from two sides.
Yes, because as stated on my original playthrough, once again, for all I care I would have come up with a 100% self-destructive plan. But hey, at least these maps are looking a whole lot better, aren't they? This zone's a whole lot better when you have a spammable crowbar. Thank you, Mr. Cyric. So, the fire extinguisher wasn't at all necessary since the start. Nice to see Vlad's been going back to reason and cutting shit like this. Too bad he left the sign for no reason at all. Yes, this still seems to need some work. Heck no, not falling for such a painful trap twice. Now please leave me alone, Mr. Monster Machine. Nice, at least they now know their place and know how to block entrances. That's something I guess. Time for a rematch with a humanoid tortoise with a cannon. Though the AK-47 isn't the most accurate of these, it sure is the most fun to use. Never mind. My Charmy sense has activated my pinch mode, and as always, I won't hesitate to comply. My only chance of moving along, well, it seems I'll have to go through these guys again. Nice automatic weapon switch system specially made to screw you over. Let me guess that was my incapability of switching weapons when in combat. Why do I always have to pick this shit up to get shot? This is just becoming grating. Behold, the ultimate drink of them all. Literally gives you 100 health and an achievement. But what else can come from BriJee's mind better than this? Hell yeah, no matter if the MP5's record is still pure garbage, at least with iron sight, it can be really fun to use as well.
Is that a disembodied head?
What is it even doing here? Is it for me to practice on? I guess I'll just use it as target practice. Oh look, the binnacle ammo thing again. I guess all left now is to try to destroy that helicopter. Again, as I said on the original playthrough, how powerful one's imagination can be to make a button like decal actually work. Turns out this hat just teleports to Alex with zero explanation. Oh well, at least it gives you an achievement, so I guess I shouldn't whine about stuff like logics here. So, this is what this guy meant by stealth gameplay? Another point to the angry review mob for the stealth is just walking behind idle enemies claim. Why didn't any of my inputs connect with the door despite this being a think fast segment? BriJee took it too far this time.
Wait.
This garage wasn't here before, I'm so sure. At least BriJee did a good job on making it look like an actual garage.
Survivors.
Is it even supposed to be possible for any of these guys to survive the assault? Let me place my bet on this being just another unintended feature. It's time to put that meta beast to sleep once and for all. Oh. Never mind, it seems it was too scared to go further. I guess I tried. Another open letter to BriJee. These snipers just won't land any of their shots, none of them, making this section sort of boring. If that could be taken care of, I bet the angry review mob and I would be very pleased.
Wait.
Where are you going, Captain Depression? Oh well. Guess he just can't handle it anymore. So he's going with the helicopter to just end it. Very positive thinking indeed. Can this weapon stripper be somehow deactivated? I mean, a grenade explosion isn't just a small poke, you know? Oh well, I guess not. As stated on the original playthrough for the 7th time, this sound just reminds me of the subways here in Mexico. Just why? Oh my. How hasn't these over-the-top effects for the chargers been taken down already? As every floor here, it was mentioned back on my original video, but I guess this is good for argument's sake.
Let's get out of here. Help!
Again, very beautiful transitions between closed door sections. Oh, turns out the shiny is still a thing. At least it can be thrown into the background, because these soldiers up next are the real pain here.
Oh, this place must have been nice once. I wonder how long it's been since anyone stayed here.
Once you think about it, these sentences make even less sense, as Alex is supposed to know what Kleiner and align you about this place, and probably the answer to such a question. I don't remember this Isaacs being here. Guess it was part of the update to further throw Wheatonhit into the background.
Keep watch out here if you want to look inside for the cache.
What cache?
Aren't we supposed to be seeking the ship itself and its destruction, and not any sort of cache? Oh well, what am I even expecting at this point? Hunt down the wooden crate. Best Half-Life 2 mod to ever be conceived. 100. As I said earlier, there's still plenty to improve, and deleting unnecessary items like that is one step I'd say it's logical to take if it'll only be for one map. Oh no, Chomsky confirmed for Smash. Best representative for the PC to ever exist. Oh, boss fight time everybody. Now, the angry review mob kept saying this guy is impossible to beat, but there's a trick to do it easily. Hide in a corner so it can't get you. I can't believe people couldn't figure that out themselves. Oh look, it now only lasts a third of the damage it took before the path. Oh yes, I clearly remember this. What are you even doing here? Oh great, here we go again into the one map stolen from Black Mesa. At least he now has far nicer textures and overall brightness, but there's still that Half-Life Generations vibe that, like everything else here, was already mentioned in the original playthrough. Oh, so that's why they give you the TAU cannon earlier, so these guys can be already waiting for you here. Too bad the naked alien grunt model hasn't been fixed it seems. The angry review mob and everyone's eyes would be really pleased if you fixed that. Sirik. Oh! Now, the best method to avoid these broken hound eyes is simple.
Running away.
You know, the improvements to this mod are so great my game is now hitting roughly 9 FPS. So pleasant to go through. As if a controller wasn't already enough of a headache. Now also an alien grunt will be trying to kill you from up there it seems. Please, just stop it Mr. Cyric. Once again, incredibly massive gaming skills and display right here. Such reflexes for failing to hop between two sad rocks can't be replicated. Hunt down the barnacle, now available for the Valve Index. Buy now for only $1 gazillion. 81 health points and this guy still killed me one shot. Why does BriJee have such a hard-on for overpowered Zen enemies? Why would anyone even use the grenades when the glue-on gun is more than enough with all of this ammo scattered around? At least you now find it next to the former owners and not out of nowhere like in the first version. So I guess BriJee actually did his homework now on what made Half-Life special. Hello there. Oh, it seems they're still camera shy much, but again, quoting my original playthrough for the 9th time, it isn't like I wasn't scared of everything as well. Hey, and Lan, could you please?
Oh now, what is even going on?
Oh, so now the bug bait has a chemical reaction with a totally not a gunship eye? Very nice. So much that it made this puzzle completely unnecessary. Now I see why the alien worker kills itself. Not gonna comment too much on the barnacle anymore, as it is a recycled weapon from opposing force it seems. So let's skip to the good stuff. You see, that is definitely a hint to BriJee's Lone Soldier community test. Isn't Shepard's fate on this game's non-existent continuity beautiful? Oh, so now you can't move your sight around anymore? Kinda helps delivering the message of the zone. But again, I would have preferred if BriJee fixed much worse problems rather than these kind of super minor shit. So, it seems this ending sequence is much more complete for the newer details, so let's see what Mr. Cyric came up with.
What in the world?
Yeah, this is definitely an alternate universe aperture it seems. Oh, they're frozen in time? Lucky me, it seems. Wait.
You again, you combine underling.
Cleverly done, Mr. Freeman, but you're not supposed to be here.
Definitely going to try to kill him with weapon hit. He deserves it. The Borealis?
On the much more modern looking aperture. Science? What are you doing, BriJee?
Didn't you know the Borealis took off in the 70s? Aperture, which I guess also applies to parallel universes, and that its teleportation was an accident and not an escape attempt from the workers at Aperture. Just how bad can you mess this up?
Pay attention, Mr. Freeman. I'm only going to say this once. That's all for now.
Gordon? Are you okay?
But what in the fuck of all hex just went on back there?
So, finally, after a week or so of making this, I can finally finish the review that update gate kept me from doing. Any possible head to head before the review and stuff are already in the first video. So let's just hop right into what matters.
And or probably the sole reason you wanted to watch this anyway.
So, as said on the original review, the Half-Life games in general are known for their exceptional quality, but the lack of a conclusion or even further expansions at the very least basically forced the fan base itself to try to conclude the story themselves, and it was in all of that chaos that we find this little game. At first glance, this mod seems to be a straightforward, to the point experience. A fan-made replacement for the third entry on the episodic saga of Half-Life 2. However, as the player advances through the map just a bit, they immediately realize this mod simply isn't the wet dream experience they desired to ever even play a work like this. This mod, at least superficially, seems to want to stay true to the Valve method of storytelling, placing the necessary exposition for the player itself to understand the objectives and all necessary for the next section. However, as you dig a bit deeper into the very first sequence, this work's flaws become increasingly evident. And let me tell you, the bad definitely outweighs the good here. The first sin this game commits is born out exposition at the first act and then completely ditching it for the next 3. So, what I exactly mean is the fact at the very start, probably less than a minute into the experience, there is already a terribly voiced character speaking to the player for 3 or 4 minutes straight with nothing else going on. Nothing. This is a very bad problem. Since in Half-Life 2 itself, the main work this game is using as a basis, there was much going on in the backgrounds, either via NPCs doing things or actually functional props and artifacts lying around so the player doesn't get too bored. Thing that, of course, didn't translate to this in any way. Oh yes, that's another issue. The terribly done voice acting is definitely the drop that spills the glass here. Yes, I understand this is a mod made by a single person, but that's no excuse when an extensive list of collaborators is scrolled by at the end. It just becomes worse halfway through the first chapter, where if the lack of any emotional, just something as simple as clear speech was already a burden to your ears, that filter, vocoder, or whatever BriJee used for that is 100% guaranteed to kill off as many brain cells as the player has left by that point.
Come back to the base as soon as you can. Our sensors notice that the enemy force is advancing. We need to deliver the data at any cost.
Another big problem is the new characters themselves. This man whose name is never mentioned.
We will take you to Captain Maxwell
And Dr. Heckler. By the start, the player is probably expecting a figure like how Eli Vance and Dr. Kleiner were in Half-Life 2. However, as I mentioned earlier and in the original video, they have little to no involvement to the plot other than being carriers of information when seen, especially with Dr. Heckler, as his entire appearance is resumed in a couple of lines and nothing else afterwards. Thing that was okay in the first Half-Life, as the scientists the player came across were that fellow scientists on their way out of Black Mesa, but when you consider they're supposed to be the main focuses of this mod, you can't help it but make fun of how short their appearances are, and how awful the line delivery is with the two of them.
Look, Mr. Freeman, together we must do everything we can to put an end in this war.
After the exposition is finally over, and a not so good auto-driving sequence, we get to probably one of the few good parts of this little game, the shooting moments. Of course, as the original games were also first-person shooters, the main focus would be the spectacle the shot interchanges would deliver. Except that, considering this is Half-Life, it's reasonable to think another big chunk of the efforts would have been put into the storytelling, but I guess that will much more appropriately will be brought up later. Let's focus on the shootings for now. These are by far the most entertaining parts of this mod, and it's clear why. It's evident BriJee wanted the bullet exchanges to be the main attraction of this mod, unnecessary weapons with over-the-top screen effects and all, but he forgot something important. Guess what it is? This is Half-Life. This is a franchise that is supposed to go beyond the shootings and into its unique storytelling methods to deliver messages and progress on the plot, so I'd say this wrong area focus shouldn't be ignored when reviewing this mod. Of course, the stories in these games have never been too complex, especially with the first game, since no matter if it included some sort of story, at a certain point it just becomes a let's get out of here linear plot with little to offer other than, you guessed it, the frenetic shootings. Yes, its focus might change at the end of chapter 5 to a let's get to point B plot line, but still, it throws away many chances for a deeper impact on its points or any secondary character involvement. Thing that was fixed in Blue Shift, but that's story for another day. The main point is, no matter if they weren't too complex, but the plots in these games have always been the big driving forces behind these works, regardless if they sometimes fell back on the visual spectacle of shooting sections. Thing that BriJee seems to have forgotten, especially with a couple nonsensical turns later on this game's attempt at big plot, but we'll save that for later on. But the fact is, yes, no matter if these segments are fun, they just can't with the weight of this game's many flaws. Yes, I mean it. It's somewhat pleasing to look at least at first glance, and no, the oh so trendy assumption the source engine is outdated is not what is holding it back, not at all. In fact, I'd say that its full potential as a guy's first mod was not wasted in the slightest. The skyboxes in the Arctic maps are pretty good looking. The edges of open maps like the one at the very start are believably cut, and the use of darkness later in the sections at the Borealis isn't too abusive. And let me say right now, the section of the attack inside the Arctic base is quite good looking and somewhat detailed. The weapons themselves are pretty to look at, especially the MP5's Iron Sight and the Desert Eagle overall. And as far as my very experience is concerned, no glitches with the weapons are notable in the even the somewhat bland looking TAU cannon head is compensated by the gradual energy build-up effect the thing has. Not much to say, really. They are what they are, and considering how this mod tends to screw things up, it's something. But before we wrap up on this point, we should address some negatives. The most notable negative is the screen effects, as said by the angry review mob and even myself on the original playthrough. Yes, I'm aware the vaporwave-like effect when you get hurt had been disabled by default, but that doesn't count when it was replaced by an even worse effect when you're at low health. This red halo could completely destroy anyone's chances at surviving a section, as it completely blinds the player's sight on sides, and considering the action sections require constant movement from the player, the moment an unseen projectile kills the player will come, instead of being delayed by the player's own skill. It might not seem like a lot, especially when you're sitting back watching a playthrough, but instead of aiding to transmit any feeling, it only hinders the player's performance, or completely destroys their chances at victory if the weapon's recoil wasn't already a mere problem. But we'll get to that when we speak about the gameplay. I know I might be entering on the gameplay a bit here, but it's still mostly a graphical problem. Even if the loading screen itself recommends using the flare gun in dark rooms, it really helps nothing at all. Seriously, all it does is noise and that's it. Doesn't light up the room in the slightest. It becomes totally useless when it only deals minor damage to enemies instead of something like setting them on fire, which would compensate for its sluggish reload time. But nope, BriJee instead opts to make it utterly useless and not even bothering on making it somewhat satisfying to use in the slightest. But again, that's a gameplay problem, not necessarily a graphical problem. Or maybe because I turned down the quality of everything to the lowest. Oh well. Another big graphical complaint is with the Combined Super Soldier. And no, it's not their bonus that's a gameplay problem, but what I mean is they are basically reskinned Overwatch soldiers, that's it. Even if the model already had arm cannons and a cold war problems with the regular soldiers' animations, BriJee simply charged forward and gave them a handheld gun, the iron rifle, which could simply be passed as a lazy excuse to include cut enemies into this mod, as said on my original playthrough. And before we move on, no, the naked alien grunt model doesn't really count as a graphical problem, but it's likely another reflection of BriJee's odd sense of direction, or maybe just laziness on his behalf. But whatever, let's move on to the part everyone was likely waiting for me to speak about, the gameplay. So, how to sum up this little MOD gameplay? Simple, overly exaggerated effects, extremely over-the-top recoil, awful use of the new weapons and enemies, useless or replaceable weapons that only last for one map, extremely overpowered Zen enemies, quick load quick save glitches, advisor kills you in the Borealis and you try to respawn, game crashes, and automatic health regeneration when you progress to the next map. Yes, gameplay wise, this mod is really awful, so let me explain point by point what I mean. First, let's address one of the most annoying flaws, the effects. What a shocker, right? Seriously, no matter if I already mentioned the low health effect, but it's so badly used its repercussions spread to gameplay itself. As mentioned earlier, instead of getting a feel of desperation across, it only hinders the combat and the player's perception of their surroundings, which could lead to failure much more times than expected. I could mention the charger's effects as well, but lucky for the players, their appearances are reduced to nothing else than shock value for one map, but I guess the point still stands. Add that to the constant barrage of additional effects like the health vial or suit battery effect, which will be constantly seen through the experience, and you have tons of brain cells dead in just one playthrough. Second off, the weapons are so poorly implemented that, as said previously by the angry review mob plenty of times, the recoil is just too much to have an enjoyable experience. Of course, there are some exceptions like the AK-47 or the AR-2 rifle, but most of them like the MP5 have a recoil so bad that the player will end up using something close to half a load before getting a target at mid-range. It is especially awful because such a problem was present since day one, and even with such a massive update shipped about 3 weeks ago, it still hasn't been taken care of, which only adds to the already evidenced no level of care put into these aspects. If the overly deficient combat system wasn't enough, we have to add unnecessary, quickly forgotten weapons that either pass completely ignored like the iron cannon or sniper rifle, or are removed too quickly when one would expect their appearances to be longer like the glue-on gun or even the already iconic crowbar. Add that to the lack of anything related to the also iconic gravity gun and you have a careless, soulless experience with absolutely zero understanding on how to be to add insuccessor to the games the experience is being based off of, even in something as basic as the weapons. My previous point about the flare gun. Entering the level design, the maps used through the adventure, there is a significant upgrade on both detail and overall atmosphere, like said earlier, but what kind of substance do they have? Nothing. Seriously, the lack of the gravity gun or even interesting puzzles at the very least completely locks this work out from reaching its full potential, gameplay wise. Of course, there might be 1 or 2 scripted sequences out of the painfully borne out speech from Mr. Maxwell at the beginning, but otherwise there's only the action bits which we spoke about earlier, resulting the experience to quickly become somewhat stale and uninteresting out of a couple of questions the plot this game tries to build raises on anyone's mind, but I guess that's for later. At least if that later means now. Discussing in depth about the plot, it really sucks just how this game overall does. To start off, Eli and Kleiner are simply not present in any way, and as mentioned previously, are completely replaced by Mr. Captain Depression and Dr. Heckler despite their stupidly short screen time and awful line delivery, which completely takes one out of believing this is actually attempting to be some sort of conclusion to Half-Life 2's episodic saga. It just becomes even worse when important plot points like Mossman's shenanigans are barely mentioned and completely forgotten in favor of whatever BriJee decided was appropriate. Not even when you arrive at the place where she was supposedly captured you find a single trace of her or even a mention afterwards of her fate after the attack. Absolutely nothing. Which is a very bad problem when your little mod is supposed to be trying to close on such pieces of lore. If that wasn't already bad enough, after the exposition and into the second section, we are introduced to the Combined Super Soldier, which as many other enemies in this mod like the alien assassins come out of nowhere and just for one map. But again, it isn't for anything at all, not even for progressing on the mystery of Mossman's fate. After entering Chapter 2, after the player has lost it all, including the crowbar, an already iconic weapon for the saga, instead of seeking the Borealis to either keep it or destroy it as established in Episode 2, BriJee instead opts to start a search for the cache. Which to anyone playing this for a fan-made Episode 3 feels like a huge middle finger from his behalf, yet he doesn't seem to care and charges forward with more nonsense. This is what I meant since the start. So, after a completely random boss fight with a Combine advisor, comes the part that, by far, is the most outrageous, yet more unexplained part about this little game. No, there is absolutely zero context of explanation for it, not even afterwards. And considering that 10 to 20 minutes ago there was a character doing nothing but feed the player facts they already clearly knew for context, this comes across as another pretty disrespectful move from Mr. Cyric, to the point where, from this point on, not two shits are given for the plot to the point the player goes to Zen for an entire chapter. To me, This is the game's most grave sin of them all, next to ditching any sort of explanation for what's going on at parts like the 4th chapter on Black Mesa, completely ignoring what the plot of a fan-made episode 3 needs to be worthwhile or even being what the player base has been longing for 12 years in favor of completely random, unexplained moments to the point when it doesn't feel like what it's supposed to be at all. Like if the author took the plot points needed to be closed in a third Half-Life 2 episode and said, all this useless, let's make what we want instead. Yet he doesn't advertise any of this as such and instead tries to pass it as a conclusion to Half-Life 2's argumental arc, which, as almost every twist and turn on the plot, comes across as a very loud fuck you to the players. Finally, after all this parade of random nonsense, comes the ending, which the player would assume could answer all of this and give it a sensical background, yet.
Get in, quick!
You know, I'm already too sick to keep pointing out this game's lore problems, let's just say, or of why it's stupid is evident with a single playthrough. Now please give me a break. In conclusion, Arctic Adventure Episodes is
a horrific piece of shit mod played with problems left and right.
okay. In all seriousness now, this game is just unsalvageable in any aspect. The gameplay is somewhat disjointed and dysfunctional. It's visually bland for what Source Engine has been shown capable of doing 12 years ago, and has a completely random, unexplained lore that completely ignores what it would need to succeed as a fan-made Half-Life Episode 3. Listen, I really wanted to like this mod. It has an Arctic setting, a new vehicle, includes cut enemies and a subtle sonic generations point with the trip to Black Mesa, yet with all of its many problems, it just falls completely flat to the point you can't help but feel angry beyond any measure at what you just wasted 20 hours of your life on playing. I know it's still in development, but no matter how many updates and extra content is added, it's still Arctic Adventure, with the same plot and same problems, at least at the pace it's going. And it doesn't matter if a quality control team actually played this mod, it's simply too deficient to be worth anyone's time, or to even be called a fan-made replacement for episode 3. And please, don't start asking for a playthrough on Adrian Shepard's update once it comes out, because
I just can't do it. I can't take this shit no more, man.
Final score, 4 out of 10. I hope y'all liked this or didn't lose brain cells on the course of these 2 videos. See y'all some other time after my recovery at a psychiatric hospital.